March 4, 2023. India Kinamore should have been holding her newborn son for the first time. Instead, she was found dead in her own bedroom. At 26 years old, India had everything to live for. Her hospital bag was packed. The nursery was ready. Her 6-year-old son was excited to become a big brother. But as dawn broke over Hidden Meadows Drive in Coleraine Township, Ohio, the sound of gunshots shattered what should have been the most beautiful day of her life. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were planning your destruction? India did. She trusted the father of her unborn child. She trusted him enough to let him into her home, into her life, into her future. That trust would cost her everything. When family members arrived at 8 a.m. for what should have been a celebration, they found a horror scene instead. India lay motionless, her dreams of motherhood stolen by the very person who should have protected them both. Her little boy, who had been sleeping in another room, was now an orphan who had witnessed the unthinkable. The house looked like a burglary gone wrong, furniture overturned, belongings scattered, valuables missing. But investigators would soon discover this was no random crime. This was something far more calculated, more personal, more devastating. What you're about to hear isn't just another true crime story, it's a chilling reminder that the most dangerous person in your life might be sleeping right next to you. It's about how love can be weaponized, how pregnancy can become a motive for murder, and how a due date can become a death sentence. By the end of this video, you'll understand the warning signs that could save your life or someone you love. You'll learn how India's story became a 2-year fight for justice that finally reached its turning point in 2025. If this story gives you chills like it did me, hit that subscribe button, because stories like India's need to be heard. Before we go any further, you need to know who India Kinamore really was. Because she wasn't just a headline. She wasn't just another statistic. She was a daughter, a mother, a woman with hopes and dreams that extended far beyond the tragedy that would define her story. Born in 1997, India grew up in the working-class neighborhoods of Hamilton County, Ohio. She was the kind of person who remembered your birthday, who would drop everything to help a friend in need. Her mother, Terry Kinamore, described her as having a beautiful soul, the type of woman who found joy in small moments and always saw the good in people. At just 20 years old, India became a mother to her son. While many young women might have felt overwhelmed, India embraced motherhood with fierce determination. She raised her boy primarily on her own after separating from his father, pouring her heart into giving him the best life possible. Friends remember seeing them together at local parks, India pushing him on swings while he giggled with pure happiness. By 2023, her son was 6 years old, bright, curious, and completely devoted to his mom. India had built their life around stability and love. Their modest home on Hidden Meadows Drive wasn't fancy, but it was filled with everything that mattered: family photos, toys scattered across the living room floor, and artwork from school proudly displayed on the refrigerator. India worked entry-level jobs to support them both, never complaining about the long hours or the financial struggles that came with single parenthood. She had that quiet strength that so many single mothers possess, the ability to make magic happen on a tight budget, to turn everyday moments into special memories. When India discovered she was pregnant with her second child, the excitement was overwhelming. She spent hours preparing the nursery, folding tiny clothes, and talking to her son about becoming a big brother. He was just as thrilled as she was, already planning all the ways he would help take care of his baby brother. Terry watched her daughter's joy during those months and saw a woman who had found her purpose. India attended every prenatal appointment religiously. She read parenting books. She researched the best car seats and cribs. This wasn't an accidental pregnancy, this was a wanted child, a planned addition to their little family. The bond between India and her mother was unbreakable. Terry was her confidant, her support system, her voice of reason when life got complicated. They talked almost daily, sharing everything from parenting concerns to relationship advice. India never made major decisions without calling her mom first. As March 4th approached, India was counting down the days with pure excitement. She had her hospital bag packed weeks in advance. The baby's room was complete down to the last detail. Her son had picked out a special stuffed animal to give his new brother. Everything was ready for what should have been the happiest day of her life. Can you imagine the excitement she must have felt, counting down to meet her baby? Let me know in the comments, what was the happiest anticipation you've ever experienced? Enter Kayvon Warren. 30 years old, charming when he wanted to be, and exactly the kind of man who knew how to sweep a single mother off her feet. Warren came into India's life during one of those moments when everything seemed to be falling into place. She had her routine with her son, her relationship with her mother was strong, and she was ready to let someone new into their world. Warren seemed like the answer to her prayers. At first, he was everything India thought she needed. He showed up when he said he would. He was good with her 6-year-old son, playing video games and taking him to get ice cream. He helped around the house, fixed things that were broken, and made India feel like she finally had a partner instead of doing everything alone. Warren worked in logistics, a steady job that suggested stability and responsibility. He drove a decent car, dressed well, and talked about future plans with the confidence of a man who had his life together. To India's family and friends, he seemed like a catch. Here was a man who was willing to step into a ready-made family and embrace the responsibility that came with it. But if you looked closely, and few people did at the beginning, there were small signs that something wasn't quite right. Warren had very specific ideas about how India should spend her money. He offered to help with her finances, suggesting she didn't need to buy certain things for her son. He positioned this as being helpful, as looking out for their future together. India saw it as him caring about their financial security. He also had strong opinions about her friendships. When India would make plans with her girlfriends, Warren would suddenly have something important they needed to do together. When her family called, he would encourage her to keep the conversations short because they had better things to do. He framed this as wanting to spend quality time together, as prioritizing their relationship above all else. Notice how control often masquerades as protection. What seems like a caring partner making suggestions can actually be someone systematically isolating you from your support system. Then came the pregnancy announcement. India was over the moon. She had dreamed of giving her son a sibling, of expanding their little family. When she told Warren the news, expecting joy and excitement, his reaction was different. Warren didn't celebrate. He didn't pull her into his arms or start talking about baby names. Instead, he got quiet. He asked if she was sure. He wanted to know exactly how far along she was, as if he was calculating something in his head. Over the following days, Warren's true feelings became clear. He didn't want this baby. He had never planned on being a father again, his words, not mine. He started talking about their finances, about how expensive children were, about how this would change everything between them. The suggestions started small. Maybe they should wait. Maybe this wasn't the right time. Maybe they should think about their options. When India made it clear that terminating the pregnancy wasn't an option for her, Warren's behavior shifted. The charming boyfriend who had won over her family started showing his real face. He became distant, irritable, almost resentful of her growing belly. Warren began complaining about the cost of prenatal appointments. He would make comments about how much space the baby would take up, how their lives would never be the same. He started picking fights about small things, creating tension where there had been none before. India confided in her mother Terry about these changes, but she was still hopeful. Many men get nervous about becoming fathers, she reasoned. He would come around once he held his son in his arms. But Warren wasn't getting nervous about fatherhood. He was planning something else entirely. As India's pregnancy progressed, Warren's mask began to slip completely. What had started as subtle control was becoming open hostility, and the man India thought she knew was revealing someone far more dangerous. Terry Kinamore watched her daughter's relationship with growing concern. During their daily phone calls, she could hear the strain in India's voice. Warren's attitude toward the pregnancy hadn't improved. If anything, it was getting worse. He would make cutting remarks about the baby ruining everything. He complained constantly about money, even though India was working and contributing to their household expenses. But it wasn't just the financial complaints that worried Terry. It was the way Warren had started treating India herself. He would dismiss her pregnancy symptoms, telling her she was being dramatic when she felt sick or tired. When India got excited about baby preparations, Warren would shut down the conversations, making her feel foolish for her enthusiasm. The red flags were multiplying, and Terry wasn't the only one who noticed. India's friends saw less and less of her. When they did spend time together, India seemed anxious, constantly checking her phone for messages from Warren. She had started making excuses for his behavior, explaining away his hostility as stress from work or fear about becoming a father. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Terry's maternal intuition was screaming that Warren was dangerous, but India was still hoping the man she fell in love with would return once their son was born. What India didn't know was that Warren had already decided their son would never be born. Behind the scenes, Warren was building a network of accomplices. Robert Irvin, just 20 years old, was someone Warren had known from his neighborhood circles. Lamar Morris Suggs, 22, was another associate who moved in Warren's social sphere. Both young men looked up to Warren, saw him as someone with experience and authority. Warren began having conversations with Irvin and Suggs about his problem. He framed the pregnancy as something that was destroying his life, painting India as someone who was trying to trap him with a baby he never wanted. He talked about how much child support would cost him, how his freedom was being stolen, how unfair it all was. These weren't casual complaints. Warren was methodically building a case for why India and her unborn child needed to be eliminated. He was recruiting soldiers for a war India didn't even know was being declared against her. The planning became more specific as February turned into March. Phone records that would later be analyzed by investigators showed an increasing frequency of calls and texts between Warren, Irvin, and Suggs. They discussed logistics. They talked about timing. They planned what would look like a random burglary but was actually cold-blooded murder. How abusers plan methodically is one of the most chilling aspects of intimate partner violence. This wasn't a crime of passion. Warren didn't snap in a moment of anger. He calculated every detail, recruited help, and chose the most vulnerable moment possible to strike. Then came the smoking gun that would later seal Warren's fate in court. On February 28, 2023, just 4 days before India's due date, Warren went to his employer and requested bereavement leave. He told them a family member had died and he would need time off to handle the funeral arrangements and support his grieving relatives. There was no dead family member. There was no funeral. Warren was creating an alibi for murder. This single act revealed the depth of his premeditation. Warren wasn't just planning to kill India and their unborn son, he was planning to take time off work afterwards so he could deal with the aftermath without raising suspicions about his absence. The importance of families staying connected cannot be overstated. If Terry hadn't maintained daily contact with India, if she hadn't been planning to check on her daughter on March 4, India's body might have gone undiscovered for days. Warren's fake bereavement story might have provided the perfect cover. As March 4 approached, India was preparing for the happiest day of her life. Her hospital bag was ready. Her son was excited about becoming a big brother. She was counting down the hours until she would finally meet her baby. Warren, meanwhile, was finalizing plans for the darkest day of his life. He had crossed a line from which there would be no return. The man India trusted with her heart was about to take everything from her. If someone in your life is showing these controlling behaviors, please reach out to someone you trust. Your life might literally depend on it. March 4, 2023. The day that should have changed India Kinnamore's life forever, just not in the way it did. India had gone to bed the night before with butterflies in her stomach. Tomorrow was the day. After months of preparation, doctor visits, and excited conversations with her 6-year-old son about becoming a big brother. She was finally going to meet her baby. Her hospital bag sat by the front door, packed and ready. The nursery was complete, waiting for its first occupant. She had probably lain awake for hours, too excited to sleep, running through all the things that would happen in the morning. The drive to the hospital. The first contractions. The moment when she would finally hold her son for the first time. Her older boy had already picked out the stuffed animal he wanted to give his new brother. India fell asleep that night believing she was safe in her own home, protected by the man who claimed to love her. She had no idea that Warren, Irvin, and Suggs had already finalized their plan. While she dreamed about baby names and first smiles, they were preparing to end 2 lives before the sun came up. At 6 a.m., as dawn was just beginning to break over Hidden Meadows Drive, 3 figures approached India's home. The neighborhood was still quiet, most people were either sleeping or just beginning their morning routines. Warren knew India's schedule. He knew she would be in a deep sleep, resting before what should have been the most exhausting and joyful day of her life. They accessed the house through a rear window, taking care to make it look like a random break-in. Warren had given them the layout of the home. He knew where India slept, where her son's room was, where they could enter without immediately waking anyone. The staging began immediately. Furniture was overturned. Drawers were pulled out and contents scattered across the floor. Small valuables were taken to make it look like a burglary gone wrong. Every detail was calculated to mislead investigators who would arrive hours later. India's 6-year-old son was sleeping peacefully in his own room, completely unaware that his world was about to be destroyed. In just a few hours, he should have been meeting his baby brother for the first time. Instead, he would wake up to a nightmare that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The shots that ended India's life also killed her unborn son, a baby who was so close to taking his first breath that he could have survived if he had been born just hours earlier. 2 victims in one horrific act. 2 lives stolen by someone who should have been protecting them both. Warren made sure India never woke up to defend herself or her children. She died in her sleep, probably never knowing what was happening or who was responsible. In her final moments of consciousness the night before, she was thinking about holding her baby. She never could have imagined that the father of that child was the one planning their deaths. After the shooting, the 3 men completed their staging. They wiped down surfaces, removed evidence of their presence, and arranged the scene to look like a robbery that had escalated to murder when the homeowner surprised the intruders. Then they left India to die alone. Her 6-year-old son woke up to chaos. The house was destroyed. His mother wasn't responding when he called for her. This little boy, who had been so excited about becoming a big brother, was now faced with a scene that would require years of therapy to process. At 8 a.m., a family member arrived for what should have been a celebration check-in before heading to the hospital. Instead, they found a crime scene. The 911 call that followed was filled with panic and disbelief. This was supposed to be the day India brought her baby home. Instead, paramedics were pronouncing her dead. The community of Coleraine Township was shocked into silence. This wasn't the kind of violence that happened in their neighborhood. Families like India's were supposed to be safe in their own homes. The randomness of what appeared to be a burglary gone wrong made everyone feel vulnerable. But this wasn't random at all. This was the most personal kind of violence imaginable, a betrayal by someone who had shared India's bed, her dreams, her hopes for their child's future. The cruel irony was impossible to ignore. March 4th should have been a day of new beginnings. Instead, it became a day of endings. India should have been holding her son, counting his fingers and toes, calling her mother with the good news that he had arrived safely. Instead, Terry Kinamore received a phone call that every parent fears, the call that tells you your child is never coming home. India and her unborn son became victims of the most personal kind of evil, the evil that lives in your own home, sleeps in your own bed, and gains your trust before destroying your life. For the Coleraine Township Police Department, March 4, 2023 started like any other day. Then the 911 call came in, and everything changed. When investigators first arrived at India's home on Hidden Meadows Drive, they saw exactly what Warren, Irvin, and Suggs wanted them to see: a burglary gone tragically wrong. The overturned furniture, scattered belongings, and missing valuables painted a clear picture of random violence, or so it seemed. The initial investigation followed standard protocol for what appeared to be a home invasion. Crime scene technicians photographed every angle, collected fingerprints, and documented the chaos throughout the house. The Hamilton County Coroner's Office confirmed what everyone already knew: India and her unborn son had died from multiple gunshot wounds. But even in those first hours, something didn't feel right to the investigators. The staging was almost too perfect, too obvious. Experienced detectives develop an instinct for these things, and several elements of the crime scene raised questions that couldn't be easily answered. The forensic evidence collection was exhaustive. Every surface was dusted for prints. DNA samples were taken from multiple locations. The 9mm handgun used in the shooting was never found at the scene, but ballistics experts would later match bullet fragments to a specific weapon. Warren played his role perfectly in those early days. He showed up at the hospital where India should have been giving birth, playing the devastated boyfriend who had lost both his girlfriend and his son. He attended the funeral. He comforted India's family. He was taking bereavement leave from work. After all, he had time to grieve. But as weeks turned into months, the case began to grow cold. Despite extensive canvassing of the neighborhood and interviews with family and friends, investigators couldn't find the break they needed. The apparent randomness of the crime made it difficult to identify suspects or establish motives. For Terry Kinamore and the rest of India's family, this silence was agonizing. Every day that passed without arrests felt like another day that India's killers were walking free. The media attention that had initially focused on the tragic timing of the murder began to fade as other stories took priority. Terry never stopped pushing for answers. She maintained contact with investigators, organized community awareness events, and kept India's story alive on social media. She knew in her heart that this wasn't a random crime, even when the evidence seemed to suggest otherwise. The breakthrough finally came in July 2025, more than 2 years after India's murder. A tip came into the Coleraine Township Police Department. Someone with knowledge of the crime was finally ready to talk. That single phone call would crack open a case that had seemed impossible to solve. Investigators immediately shifted their focus to digital evidence. Cell phone records became the key that unlocked everything Warren thought he had hidden. The phone data revealed a stunning pattern of communication between Warren, Robert Irvin, and Lamar Morris Suggs in the days and weeks leading up to March 4, 2023. The digital evidence analysis was staggering. Over 1,000 pieces of electronic evidence were collected and examined. Text messages revealed planning discussions. Location data placed all 3 men near India's home at the time of the murder. Call records showed the increasing frequency of contact as the crime date approached. The text message communications between the conspirators were particularly damning. These weren't casual conversations, they were detailed discussions about timing, logistics, and execution. Warren's messages revealed his true feelings about the pregnancy and his determination to prevent the birth of his son. Location data from their cell phones placed Warren, Irvin, and Suggs in the exact area of Hidden Meadows Drive during the window when the murder occurred. This wasn't circumstantial evidence, this was digital proof that they were at the scene of the crime. The ballistics evidence that had been collected in 2023 suddenly had new relevance. The 9mm handgun fragments found in India's body could now be connected to Warren through additional forensic analysis. DNA traces that had seemed random in the initial investigation now made perfect sense when viewed through the lens of Warren's involvement. On August 21, 2025, a Hamilton County grand jury handed down indictments that would finally bring India's killers to justice. Warren, Irvin, and Suggs were each charged with 2 counts of murder, one for India and one for her unborn son. Additional charges included aggravated burglary, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy. Warren and Irvin were arrested that same day and held on $600,000 bonds without the possibility of bail. Justice was finally within reach. Warren didn't act alone. The murder of India Kinamore required multiple hands, multiple minds, and multiple people willing to cross the ultimate line. Meet the two young men who helped him destroy an innocent family. Robert Irvin was just 20 years old when he agreed to help Warren kill a pregnant woman. 20 years old, barely out of his teens, with his whole life ahead of him. Instead of building a future, he chose to help steal someone else's. Irvin was arrested on August 21, 2025, and is currently being held on a $600,000 bond without the possibility of bail. Lamar Morris Suggs was 22, old enough to understand exactly what he was agreeing to when Warren recruited him for this deadly mission. Unlike Irvin, Suggs remains at large. Despite the indictments, despite the evidence against him, despite the warrant for his arrest, he has managed to evade law enforcement. Every day he remains free is another day that justice is incomplete for India and her family. What roles did these young men play in the crime? According to prosecutors, both Irvin and Suggs were active participants in the break-in at Hidden Meadows Drive. They helped stage the burglary. They helped create the chaos that was meant to fool investigators. They were there when Warren pulled the trigger, ending 2 lives in their sleep. The legal defenses being mounted tell a familiar story. Irvin's attorney claims his client was only peripherally involved, that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, that he never intended for anyone to get hurt. The defense argues that the group chat messages and location data don't prove direct participation in murder. But here's the reality: when you help someone break into a home where you know violence is planned, you become responsible for everything that happens inside those walls. How criminals recruit help follows predictable patterns. Warren didn't randomly choose 2 strangers off the street. He selected young men from his social circle, people who looked up to him, people who could be manipulated into believing his version of events. He probably framed the situation as solving a problem, as handling business, as doing what needed to be done. The loyalty versus moral responsibility conflict is where many accomplices fail their most basic humanity test. Whatever loyalty Irvin and Suggs felt toward Warren, it should never have outweighed their moral responsibility to protect innocent life, especially the life of an unborn child. The ripple effect of violence extends far beyond the immediate victims. India's 6-year-old son lost his mother and baby brother. Terry Kinamore lost her daughter and grandson. The community lost its sense of safety. And 2 young men destroyed their own lives in service of someone else's evil plan. In the 2.5 years since that devastating morning in March 2023, Terry Kinamore has transformed unimaginable grief into a beacon of quiet strength. The woman who once rushed to her daughter's side, only to find her gone forever, now stands as a fierce advocate for those trapped in the shadows of intimate partner violence. "I never gave up," Terry shared in her first public interview after the August 2025 arrests, her voice steady as she stood at India's gravesite. "God showed me that justice would come, and now I can tell my baby and her little boy that the monsters who did this are locked away." What started as private prayers at the cemetery has evolved into Terry's mission, speaking at community forums in Coleraine Township, urging lawmakers to strengthen Ohio's domestic violence laws, and reminding women everywhere that silence isn't safety, it's a cage. Terry's advocacy isn't abstract, it's born from the raw ache of loss. She describes the early days as a fog of funeral arrangements and whispered condolences, but faith pulled her through. Today, she channels that energy into supporting other families, volunteering with local shelters to help single mothers escape cycles of control. Her message is simple yet searing: love shouldn't feel like a trap. If it does, run toward the light, your family, your friends, the truth. At the heart of Terry's fight is her grandson, India's 6-year-old son, the brave little boy who discovered his mother's body that fateful morning. Now 7, he's navigating a world forever altered, shielded by the fierce love of his grandmother and extended family. Therapy sessions have become weekly anchors, helping him process the trauma with age-appropriate tools, drawing sessions where he sketches rainbows over dark clouds, play therapy that turns fear into stories of superheroes. He's resilient, just like his mama, Terry says, her eyes lighting up at mentions of his soccer games or bedtime giggles. Community support has been a lifeline. A GoFundMe launched in the weeks after the murder raised over $15,000 for his counseling, school supplies, and a trust fund to secure his future. Neighbors in Coleraine organized meal trains and playdates, weaving a safety net from shared sorrow. India's light refuses to fade. In her honor, the India Kinamore Memorial Scholarship, launched in September 2023 through Bold.org and partners like Leaf Ohio, has awarded $500 grants to aspiring female students, prioritizing single mothers pursuing higher education. She dreamed of finishing her degree, of giving her boys the world, Terry explains. This is her giving it back. The fund has grown to support 5 recipients so far, each a testament to India's unyielding spirit. Nationally, her story has ignited conversations on prenatal protections, with Ohio advocates pushing for expanded leave policies and mandatory DV screenings in OB/GYN offices. In Coleraine, vigils draw crowds in purple, India's favorite color, sparking workshops on spotting coercion masked as care. Terry's arraignment plea in August 2025, demanding a $600,000 bond for the suspects, echoed far beyond the courtroom. My daughter can't come back. But no other mother should feel this pain. India's story shows us that domestic violence doesn't discriminate. If you or someone you know needs help, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. Save this number, it could save a life. Drop a comment. What's one way we can better support survivors in our communities? Your voice matters. India Kinamore's story is a heartbreaking wake-up call, but it's also a roadmap to spotting danger before it's too late. Domestic violence often hides behind a facade of love, and recognizing the red flags can be a lifesaver. Let's break them down. First, pressure to make major life decisions, like urging someone to terminate a pregnancy or quit their job, signals control, not care. In India's case, Kayvon Warren pushed her to end the pregnancy, masking his resentment as concern for their future. This isn't support, it's manipulation designed to strip away autonomy. Second, isolation from support systems is a classic tactic. Abusers might discourage visits from family or friends, claiming they're toxic or jealous. Terry Kinamore noticed Warren's subtle efforts to pull India away, but early intervention could have changed everything. Third, financial control keeps victims trapped. Withholding money, monitoring spending, or creating dependency erodes independence. Warren's financial struggles fueled his bitterness, but he used it to exert power over India. Fourth, extreme reactions to life changes, especially pregnancy, reveal true intentions. Joyous news turning to anger or withdrawal. That's a glaring warning. Warren's shift from affection to hostility after the announcement was a prelude to tragedy. Finally, planning behavior that doesn't align with stated feelings is chillingly premeditated. Requesting bereavement leave days before a supposed surprise death. It screams deception. But here's the empowerment: you hold the power to break the cycle. Trust your intuition. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore that gut feeling, it's your first line of defense. Maintain connections with family and friends. Share your experiences openly to stay grounded. Document concerning behaviors, texts, calls, incidents, with dates and details to build a record if needed. And know your resources. The National Domestic Violence Hotline 1-800-799-7233 offers confidential support 24/7. You're not alone, and acting early can protect you or someone you love. India's legacy isn't just loss, it's a call to vigilance. As of September 2025, the wheels of justice are turning slowly but surely in the India Kinamore case. Kayvon Warren and Robert Irvin remain in custody at Hamilton County Justice Center on $600,000 bonds, facing a 13-count indictment including 4 counts of aggravated murder, burglary, and felonious assault. Lamar Morris Suggs, already incarcerated on unrelated charges, awaits transfer for his role as the alleged shooter. Assistant Prosecutor David Hickenlooper is building a rock-solid case on cell phone data, texts, and location evidence proving premeditation, including Warren's eerie bereavement leave request. Defense strategies focus on denying intent. Warren's attorney claims he wanted the child and cooperated fully, while Irvin's team argues guilty by association, with no direct ties to India. No trial date is set, but proceedings are slated for early 2026, with the Suggs manhunt effectively paused due to his current imprisonment. The Kinamore family stands resolute. At arraignments, Terry delivered a powerful statement: "My daughter can't come back. I just don't think it's fair, at all. He killed his own son or plotted to kill his own son." Her words echo the fight for accountability. India's enduring legacy, through advocacy and awareness, reminds us that while justice may delay, it must prevail, honoring a mother and child lost too soon.